We do have another caller on, but before we go down to that path, I want to do 30 seconds of custody, access, joint custody, just separate. What does this all mean? What are the different types of relationships that you can have in sharing the responsibilities of the child?
Well, custody is something, when I started in my practice 22 years ago, was a hotly contested item a lot of people fought about. And the misnomer with that is custody doesn't equate to time. Custody is about decision-making of the major decisions: education, religion, mobility, and health. And most of them become fairly obvious. Once a child's enrolled in public school, they're going to go to school in the catchment area. For a lot of parents, they're on the same page. If a doctor says their child needs a surgery, they're going to get the surgery done. And in most cases, even if they have different religions, well, the parents will expose them to the amount of religion during their care that they want to.
Right.
And mobility would probably be a fight, irrespective if there's custody or not. People can go back and fight about whether or not they want to move from Toronto to Hamilton or Mississauga if it impacts on the schedule, or even to another province or another country. So custody really isn't an issue that you see people fighting about as often as they used to. The real issue is, what's the schedule? How often is each side going to see the children? Is there going to be a primary residence and a secondary residence, or is it going to be shared time between the two?
Right.
Being more in line with 50-50 or close to 50-50.
And how can people manage that fight? As in, is there a parenting plan that someone can put in, a schedule of some sorts, and how does one come about that type of thing?
Well, a lot of times parents will come up with a parenting plan on their own.
Right.
And it depends on what fits the needs of their family and what they think is fair in their family. The problems we get involved with is when two parties don't see eye to eye on what the parenting plan is, i.e. both parents think they should be the primary caregiver, or one parent thinks it should be equal and the other one doesn't. Then we have the challenges of how do we work out a resolution that brings people to a compromise and avoids the cost of an expensive custody dispute.
Let's say it goes down that path and the judge is sitting there in front of you. What will play in your favor and what will go against you?
The most important evidence is typically one of two pieces. If it's in court, you might ask for the Office of the Children's Lawyer to be appointed, and that's a governmental body, and if a judge makes that order, and if they accept it, because they can say no thank you, then either a social worker, a lawyer, or both will be hired, and they will meet with the children, meet with you and the children, and try and understand what it is that the children want, and are the children's views and preferences independent, or are they really aligned with someone in the sense they've been coached or repeating what one parent has said. That way a court can try and ascertain, as part of what's in the best interest of the children, what do the children want. And the other option is an assessment, but courts frequently want to look at an objective third party to understand what's in the best interest of the children.
Of course, and that is a long process, it sounds like itself. It's better to work it out beforehand. Before we go down that one again, of course, we have Andrew, more callers waiting for you. Hannah, go ahead. How can we help?
Hi, how are you?
Good, Hannah. How are you doing? How can we help you?
My question is that I have been married.
You were married?
Yes, I was married 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Okay.
And I have been separated, but not legally separated.
Okay.
With my partner.
Okay.
So my question is, if he incurs any debt,
okay,
would I be liable for that debt?
Okay.
And also, if I purchase a house,
okay,
would he be liable half of the assets?
Entitled to half of the assets. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes until we're wrapping up. So I want to make sure we get to Hannah's question in full. First of all, it says not legally separated. What would be a legal versus non-legal separation?
I hear people use that term all the time.
Okay.
And I don't know what a legal separation is. I know what the definition of separation is under the Divorce Act, which is living separate and apart And that can include a period of time up to 90 days trying to reconcile, and you wouldn't lose the date. The Family Law Act has a different definition. That definition is living separate and apart with no reasonable prospect of resumption of cohabitation. So in that scenario, if you reconcile theoretically for 1 day, you have a new date of separation. So those are the two definitions, and the question is, how do you get there based on the case law? How you get there is, are you sharing the same bedroom? Are you having meals together? Are you going to social functions together? Are you still representing yourself to the public as a couple? And you may be living in the same home and separate and apart for 2, 3, 4 years because you're in separate bedrooms and having nothing to do with one another.
Well, it makes sense because not everyone's financially able to go their own separate ways and put up their own home. So essentially the test then is, how do you function on a day-to-day basis? Is it as if you're barely roommates at all versus keeping up a front and still sharing in a lot of responsibilities?
And that's where we get pictures. Did people go on family trips together? Did they give birthday cards? Did they give anniversary cards? I mean, I've had clients come in with, they went to a friend's wedding and you see the video of them at the same table together with their arm around one another talking. And that's all part of the evidence of, does that look like a couple that's still married, or do they look like they're separated? And the relevance of that has to go back to the equalization payment I talked about before, because that date of separation is called a valuation date for the assets. And if they went up after separation, one party is going to try and say, I separated earlier because I don't want to share in the increase, and the other side is going to say, I want to share in the increase, so it's a later date.
Absolutely. So with Hannah, her question plays quite nicely into that issue right there. If Hannah buys a home, meaning that her value goes up later on, she wants to make sure the separation date is before that home is purchased. Is that correct?
Yes, but it depends. Is the house just in her name, or did she put the husband on title? And then it gets to, like I told you about before, did the husband put any money into the home so he could successfully claim he has a trust interest in that home?
I believe Hannah has not yet bought a house, so she's saying, you know, maybe we're not really separated yet. If I buy a house in the future, is he going to be entitled to anything?
Well, she wants to be clearly separated from him. So living at separate addresses, not having anything to do with him, filing your tax return as separated. Those are all elements to say we're not together anymore. But ideally, you should get a separation agreement and then get divorced so there's no ambiguity.
Okay, of course. And make sure, again, we put a lot of that information in place saying that, look, we in fact have separated. So should Hannah buy a home a year down the road before the divorce date, but after the separation, we're good to go, right?
Yes, and that's where it gets to filling out your homeowner's insurance. Everywhere you go and you fill out documents, you say to the world what your marital status is. Be truthful. If you're separated, tick separated.
And that way you'll be able to protect yourself and provide the evidence that you need to show separation. In about 10 seconds, could we just address the whole thing? What if her husband gets some debt, or her soon-to-be ex gets some debt in the meantime?
There is a provision in the family law Act that allows someone to try and say the spouse should be responsible for their basic needs. I've never seen it successfully used in my 22 years of practice, so it's highly unlikely.
Okay, again, that's highly unlikely then. Of course, when we come back, however, we will continue to help make the law a little less murky by answering your family law questions and by helping you protect you and your family's interests.